Shakira.
Welcome everyone, Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, Happy New Year to all of us. We're so happy that you're joining us this morning. Last night, a couple of hours before Shabbat, before Erev Rosh Hashanah, we learned of the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was an icon, a hero, a brilliant woman. Small in stature, she stood tall and took courageous stances on feminist issues, human rights, equality for all. She was a model of justice. She was a fighter in all senses of the world. Her family, our country, and frankly, our world mourns her death. And yet, as Rabbi Hudson said last night, we must go on. The world continues to spin, and we need to be able to stand up tall, thinking of her and frankly all of the heroes that we've lost this year, and move our world toward greater kindness and justice and compassion. New Year's remind us of first times, which are often surprising and unexpected. For example, in the Torah, the first time the word love is used is attributed not to two adults, but between a father and a son. And the first cry in the Torah is not of a newborn baby, but of a bereaved parent. And the first dream in the Torah is not by some important figure, but a marginal Philistine king. And so as we walk into this new year, I wish we wouldn't have more surprises and unexpected events, but they will happen, and we will persevere. And we'll hold each other up, and we'll sing, and we'll pray, and we'll speak from the heart, and we'll put one foot in front of the other. We rise now, page 60, for Baruch Hu.
Adonai Elohecha bechol vavka vechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha chayam alevavecha
Vishinantam levanecha vidibarta bam
Veshitecha b'beitecha uvaktecha b'derech Ukshachbecha uvkumecha Kshartam leot al yadecha Ve'yu letotafot bein einecha Uchtavtam al mezizot beitecha uvisharecha
Leman tiskeru va'ashitam et kol mitzotai
Itam kedoshim Elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etem me'eretz Mitzrayim L'chio lachem le'lachim
Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Parts of the Atacama Desert in Chile have never had any recorded rainfall. It's one of the driest places on earth, but the local farmers have learned to harvest water from the air by suspending large nets to catch cloud banks rolling in off of the Pacific Ocean. When the fog touches the nets, it forms drops of moisture, and the water rolls down along plastic strands and moves through gutters, which trickle into pipes that lead to a cistern. It's revolutionary and miraculous. When we sing Mi Chamocha, we think it's about miracles from a long time ago, but there are so many miracles right now, like when we create something out of nothing. Let's hope for the miracle of a COVID vaccine. Let's hope for a miracle of honoring Black lives and all lives. Let's hope for the miracle of peace among Israelis and Palestinians. If water can be harvested in the Chilean desert, then we can achieve some of these miracles too, here, this year. Mi Chamocha, page 65.
Lai, 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 lai.
Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Adonai Sfatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Leah ve'Elohei Rachel Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim ve'Konei Hakol V'zocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot U'mevii Geula Lifnei V'neihem Lema'an Shemo be'ahava Zochreinu lechaim melech hafetz b'chaim lechotveinu b'sefer ha'chaim lemancha Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer u'Mashiach u'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים את אימתה, רב להושיע, מוריד הטל. מחכה לחיים בחסד, מחיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך מביט ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך לחיי המתים.
You may be seated. We're here today hoping to do our best to proclaim the power of this moment. We feel close to you, yet so far. We want to make sense of who lives and who dies, but it seems beyond our comprehension. We attempt to derive meaning from our interpretations, to decipher what is said and how to understand it all. As soon as we put our thoughts into words, though, our still, small voice falters, the treachery of language. Perhaps, though, our actions can bring us comfort. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. If we can return to our truest selves, if we can connect into a deeper awareness, if we can remind ourselves that the pursuit of justice is always worthwhile, then perhaps we can embrace the challenge of not knowing. Page 70. Let us proclaim the sacred power of this day. It is awesome and full of dread. For on this day your dominion is exalted, your throne established in steadfast love. There in truth you reign. In truth you are judge and arbiter, counsel and witness. You write and you seal, you record and recount. You remember deeds long forgotten. You open the book of our days, and what is written there proclaims itself, for it bears the signature of every human being. The great shofar is sounded. The still small voice is heard. And the angels, gripped by fear and trembling, declare in awe, this is the day of judgment. For even the hosts of heaven are judged, as all who dwell on earth stand arrayed before you. As the shepherd seeks out the flock and makes the sheep pass under the staff, so do you muster and number and consider each and every soul, setting the bounds of every creature's life and decreeing its destiny.
Rosh Hashanah, Come וקיצו ומי לא וקיצו מי באש ומי במים מי בחרב ומי בחיה מי ברעב ומי בצמא מי ברעש ומי במגפה מי בחריקה
On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. How many pass on? How many thrive? Who lives on and who dies? Whose death is timely and whose is not? Who dies by fire and who by drowning? Who by the sword and who by the beast? Who by hunger? Who by thirst? Who by an earthquake? Who by a plague? Who by strangling, and who by stone? Who dwells in peace, and who is uprooted? Who lives safely, and who is harmed? Whose life is tranquil? Whose is tormented? Who is poor? Who is wealthy? Who is humbled? And who is raised up? But repentance, prayer, and righteous deeds enable us to pass through the most severe of decrees. Kadosh, 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 holy indeed. Allow us to sanctify your name on earth, even as all things, to the ends of time and space, proclaim your holiness.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וחרה זה אל זה ואמר קדוש Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Tzivaot, Melo chol haaretz kivodo. Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Ma'adir Shimcha Mechol Haaretz, Baruch Kivod Adonai, Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu vehu Yashmienu Rachamav le'nei kol chai Ani Adonai Elohei אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה 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 הו הללויה 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 הללויה.
We continue silently now through page 78.
Please be seated. The Spanish flu didn't originate in Spain. It's named thus because the virus struck in 1918 at the end of the First World War, and countries didn't want to hurt morale. So they banned any kind of reporting on the pandemic. Spain, which remained neutral and still had a free press, was one of the only European countries to chronicle the pandemic. President Woodrow Wilson failed to ever even mention the flu once in public. Historians say that the lack of a global cohesive narrative about what was happening to people, a lack of truth-telling, and an unwillingness to cooperate, a propensity for finger-pointing and name-calling, and a desire to bury news of yet another calamity on top of a series of calamities meant that the 1918 flu was experienced largely as a series of individual tragedies. In 1920, left in the pandemic's wake, the world population, racked by loss and trauma, turned to one another and said, how do we make sense of what just happened to us? And how do we move forward? Sound familiar? The way that we tell the story of what has happened to us and what is happening to us, that affects what will happen to us. It is hard to remember history as it's taking place, especially when we're isolated in our homes, lacking so much of what makes life normal, feeling our own individual pressures. You know, there's a story from the Talmud about the 2nd century Rabbi Eliezer and his student Rabbi Akiva. The rabbi's community was suffering under its own plague, an oppressive drought, and they begged their leaders for some kind of help. So Rabbi Eliezer led his community in prayer exactly as it was prescribed, and nothing happened. And then Rabbi Akiva, channeling his own fear and heartfelt prayers of that of his community and himself and his family, he stood before the Holy Ark and he said, Avinu Malkeinu Rachem Aleinu. Our parent, our ruler, have mercy upon us. And the rain began to fall. Relief. Oh, sweet relief. This was, according to our tradition, the first time anyone had ever uttered the words Avinu Malkeinu. It is a reminder that our tradition considers words that we utter from our deepest vulnerabilities
that tap into who we are to be the most efficacious, the realist. We are not the first community to throw open our hands and close tight our eyes and stare up to the heavens and inside of ourselves and say simply help to the universe. The Spanish flu infected 1 out of 3 human beings on Earth. It killed somewhere between 50 to 100 million people, and it is barely remembered as a footnote of the 20th century. Will this be our fate too? Friends, we can't wait to remember our history. We can't wait because our democracy, our collective American identity, our place in the global community, and the well-being of our neighbors, they are all at stake right now. And there are folks in our country who are attempting to write a really different history of our time. Their account exacerbates our divides, seeks to set us against each other, casts blame, spreads hate, and sows distrust. We are 7.5 billion people on this planet, 331 million people in the United States, and we are being brought to our collective knees by a virus that is 10,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. This moment, it calls for humility and empathy and connection and courage and moral leadership. A pandemic does not strike alone. Historically, we know pandemics are often accompanied by climate change and civil unrest and conflict and the massive movements of people. People are taking to the streets because there is a pandemic and despite the pandemic. Victims of abuse are coming forward with testimony, and we are listening. People of color are speaking to the racism they have faced in our country, and we are bearing witness. We are waking up to the suffering of our neighbors because we are finally still enough and quiet enough to hear them. We are reaching out to transcend physical distance because in the absence of regular human touch, our souls ache to feel connected. We are all hurting in some way. When folks ask me what comes next, what can I say? I don't know. I don't know what all this will bring or what it will mean or when it will end, but I want to tell you, and I speak this to you straight from my heart, I want this time to bring something good for our country, something good for our planet, something good for our community. What comes next? How about what comes now? Members of the TIOH community are currently partnering with other groups to make and give away 4,000 lunches every Sunday, giving them to the Hollywood Food Coalition to be spread out across the city. Organized by TIOHer Jennifer Levin, along with so many others like Francine Tanzi and Renee Makatel and Andrea Rothschild, this Tzedakah project has proved to be a soothing balm. My family, we've joined many of you in this effort. Our drop-off location is Francine Tanzi's driveway. For my young children, this ritualized weekly delivery at Francine's gate has become a source of profound connection. A few weeks ago, as we approached Francine's house, Max, one of my 3-year-olds, said to me from the back seat, "Mama, is Francine our family?" And in my heart, I said to him, "Oh, yes, Max, she is." Laura Spinney, writing about 1918, but also presciently about today, explains your best chance of survival was to be utterly selfish. Assuming you had a place to call home, the optimal strategy was to stay there, not answer the door, and jealously guard your hoard of food and water and ignore all pleas for help. However, people didn't do this. They reached out to each other, showing what psychologists refer to as collective resilience. Psychologists explain that in life-threatening situations, people's sense of self expands. They no longer identify as individuals, but as members of a group. We help others because our sense of self, it multiplies. And I would wager to guess we have all experienced this expansiveness of self. We've written postcards, and we have phone banked. We've connected with family and helped those most at risk. We have cried, and we have worried together. We have heard the stories of others, we have volunteered, and we have donated. We are doing all this because doing anything else, feeling anything else, seems contrary to what it means to be human in this moment. We don't shut our eyes. I would guess that for most of us, our eyes have never been this open. In this pandemic, we see the undeniable socioeconomic divides which determine access to resources and healthcare, finances, Wi-Fi, safe working conditions, flexible schedules, food, and education. The overwhelming inequity can feel too much to hold. And that is also part of our pandemic and the history that we have to remember right now. You know, my mom grew up in LA and graduated from high school in 1968. Her family, they struggled financially, sometimes barely scraping by. She told me stories, and these were so important to me as a child, about her shame of being kicked out of religious school because her family couldn't pay temple dues. But my mom went to Hamilton High School, a great public school, and to UCLA after that, paying almost nothing in tuition. She graduated college, became a corporate senior vice president, and retired at the age of 55. My mom told me her origin story often. For her and for me, it was predominantly an object lesson in grit. A story of resilience, not taking no for an answer, belief in oneself, and the ability to achieve anything when we put our minds to it. For my mom, glass ceilings were made to be broken. But one thing has become exceedingly clear to me over these past months. And that's that my mom's story is about community and communal investment as much as it is about individual drive. It's a story about a community that invested in its children and their communities. A state that had social safety nets. And of course, privileged white people. Times were complicated then as they are now. When my mom was in high school, California ranked 5th in the country in per pupil spending. Today, it ranks 43rd. 43rd. 80% of LAUSD students live at or below the poverty line. The pandemic has amplified the question I'm about to ask. What are we doing to care for these children and their parents today? Our federal government has failed us. And we try. We try to fill in the gaps, but the gulf is more that we can bridge on our own. To remain just helpful individuals without structural and communal change ensures that our moment will be lost to history, and that we will fail to truly expand our sense of self. Jen Levin says, and that's why making lunches is a problem. No matter how good our actions or our intentions, for this to mean something, we need to act as a collective to make real transformation. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, TIOH joined our community partners in calling on elected officials to pass a just ballot here in Los Angeles. In the end, LA officials took $150 million and reinvested it directly into communities. For me, at the time, nothing felt more pressing. Today, something feels more pressing. Schools and Communities First, or Proposition 15 on this November's ballot, is a ballot measure that the TIOH Social Justice Coalition and our community partners are working to support. If passed, SCF would reform commercial property taxes and raise approximately $12 billion a year for the state of California, $4 billion for Los Angeles, 40% of which would be given directly to K through 12 schools, and 60% would be given to communities. Am I really talking about voting on Rosh Hashanah? Yes, I am, unapologetically, because this isn't about partisanship. It's about justice and the 5781 we want to usher in, and the deep spiritual tasks before us. In 1918, New York City's health commissioner, Royal Copeland, wanted to close all the public schools. But Josephine Baker, a health department division head, persuaded him not to. She told Copeland, "I want to see if I can't keep the children in this city away from the danger of flu. I don't know that I can do it, but I would awfully well like to have a chance." And Baker won out. There are a number of reasons why our schools remain closed today. Chief among them is the novel nature of this virus. And our educational system is deeply underfunded. Our public schools simply do not have the resources they need to keep our children and their teachers safe. And so we are scrambling to figure out how to feed hungry children. And we are struggling to get folks impacted by the virus free testing. And we are failing to support working parents who don't have good options for childcare. We are figuring out how we might survive this pandemic as a city and state and nation without losing our souls, sacrificing the poor and disenfranchised among us. Hippocrates, writing in the 5th century BCE, was the first person to use the word epidemic in medical terms. In Latin, epidemic means of the people. Of the people is an apt description. The first epidemics took hold about 12,000 years ago, when our ancestors began to domesticate animals and started to live closer together. It is because we are living as a collective that pandemics take hold. But it is only by recognizing the power of the collective that we can make sense and rise out of the moment. Yes, there is a COVID-19 pandemic, but there is also an epidemic of love. This epidemic rips open our hearts, helping us feel vulnerable and connected and generous and compassionate. This is the epidemic that I hope continues to spread until it takes root in all of us. Another reason why Rabbi Akiva's Avinu Malkeinu prayer was so powerful was because he said it in the plural. Our God, have mercy on all of us. Avinu Malkeinu, we pray still today, be compassionate with us and with our children. Help us bring an end to sickness and war and famine. Move all humanity to end oppression in our midst. Forgive us, pardon us, and help us atone. we will not allow ourselves to live this moment as a series of individual tragedies. We will address it and name it and live it as the collective we are. Torah tells us that when the traumatized Israelites, recently freed from Egyptian slavery, tumbled into the desert, they sank into desperation. Thirsty, hungry, and scared, they prayed to God for help, and when a strange, white, milky substance fell from the sky, they looked one to the other and asked, "Manhu, what is it?" Throughout their time of wandering, they called the gift from God manna, for it appeared as if from nowhere, and then it was everywhere. In 1918, turning this biblical account on its head, a newspaper in Freetown suggested that the new horrific illness gripping its populace might also be called manhu, for it too descended upon them as if from nowhere and seemed to be everywhere immediately. Manhu, we ask again today. What is all this? Friends, it's potential. It is 5781 knocking at the doors to our souls, saying, open wide, live out the connecting, pulsating through all of us. Be a force of good. Make this year a blessing. Like our ancestors, we too dash about, picking up the sustenance around us, sharing it with our neighbors, and believing that the promised land is still ahead. Together, we will spread an epidemic of love. Shana Tova. Please rise for Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha, we have sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Olenu V'tapenu, be compassionate with us and with our children. Avinu Malkeinu Kale Dever V'cherev V'ra'av Me'aleinu, inspire us to fulfill your vision by ending sickness and war and famine. Avinu Malkeinu Kale Kol Tsaru Mastin Me'aleinu, move all humanity to end oppression. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim, inscribe us in the book of life. Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova, renew and refresh us for a new good year. Avinu Malkeinu Malei Yadenu Mabirchotecha, fill our hearts with blessing. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Ve'anenu Ki Ein Banu Ma'asim, Asei Imanu Tzedaka V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. Be gracious with us and respond to us, for we have too few good deeds. Place in our hearts the inspiration and will to act righteously, gently, and lovingly, and bring us meaning and salvation.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu
We're about to begin our Torah service on page 87. We have 9 teens from our community chanting Torah this morning. Please rise, page 87.
Ki mitzion tetze Torah, ki mitzion tetze Torah, udevar Adonai miYerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah, le'amo Yisrael bikedushato. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'Norah Shemo. Gadelu l'Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yachadav.
This morning we're reading from Genesis chapter 22, known as the Akedah, the story of the binding of Isaac. It is a troubling story of our father Abraham, who appears to be totally unconnected to his son Isaac, yet we're told he loves him. It's a story of a man who says he's ready to serve God, yet he's willing to perform the outrageous act of almost sacrificing his child. It's the tale of religious fanaticism gone wild and family members who no longer know how to communicate with one another. It's about the silence between loved ones and the deep sadness when repair is no longer attainable. Why do we read this story on Rosh Hashanah? Not to emulate our ancestors, but as a warning. Our world is not so different than theirs. We can lose our way. Changing course is in our hands. For the Aliyah this morning, we call forward all those who have been part of a revolution this past year. Whether you've written letters for a just cause, worked for fair, safe, and accessible elections, helped people struggling with COVID-19, fed the hungry, helped those struggling with homelessness, been a part of shaping a community toward kindness, or reached a moment of revelation and revolution in your own personal life, please come forward and recite the blessing. And on behalf of our TIOH revolutionaries, we call forward Francis Noland to recite the Aliyah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach leolam vahed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'nahatan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Vayehi ahar havarim ha'ele v'ha Elohim nisa et Abraham vayomer elav Abraham vayomer hineni vayomer kach na'ah et imcha et yediha asher ahavta et yitzhak elech lecha el eretz hamoria v'ha'avei gam le'la al ochad eharim asher omar elecha vayashkem Avraham b'boker vayahavosh et hamorah vayikach et shnei ne'arav ito ve'et yitzhak beno vayivaka atzei olah vayakom vayileh el hamakom asher amar lo ha'Elohim bayom hashlishi vayisa Avraham et einav vayar et hamakom merachot vayomer Avraham el ne'arav shvu lachem ho imach hamor va'ani v'hana'ar nelcha arko v'nishtachaveh v'nashuva aleihem vayikach Avraham et atzei ha'olah vayasem al Yitzhak beno vayikach beyado et ha'esh ve'et ha'ma'achelet vayalchu shnehem yachdav. Vayomer Yitzhak el Avraham aviv vayomer aviv vayomer hinei v'ni vayomer hinei ha'esh v'ha'etzim ve'yehasei le'olah. Vayomer Avraham Elohim Yireh lo haseh le'olah v'ni vayalhu shnehem yachdav.
Vayavo el hamakom asher amar lo ha'Elohim vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach vayarof et ha'etzim vayakol et Yitzchak beno vayasem oto al hamizbeach milmo la'etzim vayishlach Avraham et yado vayikach et ha'machelet v'yishchot et beno
Vayikra Allah
Malach Adonai min hashamayim vayomer Abraham vayomer hineni vayomer El tishlach yadcha el hana'ar ve'al ta'as lo le'uma ki ata yadati ki yirei Elohim ata velo asafta et benecha et yadcha mimeni
Vaisa Abraham et Einav Vayar v'hine ayil achar Nechas basvach bekarnav Vayelech Abraham v'kach et ha'ayil Vayelehu le'elat chadbeno Vayikra Abraham Shem makom hahu Adonai Yireh Asher Yamer Hayom Lechar Adonai Yireh
ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית עם השמיים ויאמר בי נשבעתי נאום אדוני כי יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
On behalf of all the clergy, I now want to offer a blessing for those who took part in our Aliyah of revolution. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, v'Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the one who has blessed our ancestors, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bless all of you, all who have worked toward responding to our times by not accepting the status quo and working toward reshaping our community for good and for blessing. May 5781 bless you with the courage to face life's challenges with grace and the support of your loved ones to act with bravery. And now we offer a Mishaberach, a prayer for healing. This year, the world suffers from the plague of COVID-19. People mourn far away from loved ones. Depression is rampant amongst our children and teens and adults. Many battle with substance abuse. Others are fighting cancer with chemotherapy. We invite you now to hold in your heart one part of yourself that is in need of healing, and at least one other person you're thinking of right now to whom you'd like to send a prayer of healing. We invite you to say their names out loud now. Mishaberach, page 90.
התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.
We come now to Aleinu Hagadol, which will be followed immediately by the blowing of the shofar. Aleinu Hagadol is the one time of year that Jewish people across the globe physically drop to our knees, and in an act of deep humility and recognition of all in this world that we are not in charge of, we prostrate ourselves fully to the ground, placing our foreheads to the floor. This year, I want to suggest that this act has particularly profound meaning. Friends, this year of 5780, God, it has dropped us all to our knees. We have all been humbled. None of us are in charge. And so as we say this next prayer, please join us from your homes. Allow yourselves to drop to your knees, physically or spiritually, and to feel the earth pressed to your head as you whisper into the ground, I surrender to all that I cannot control. And then as we rise, I invite us all to allow our ears and our souls and our hearts to open to the calling, to the alarm clock of urgency, the deep ringing cry, insistent and persistent, calling us to action and to justice and to change. Because as sure as we are that there is that which we cannot change, there is so much that we can, that we need to. So much around us that needs our attention. Yes, this morning it's about revolution, about turning and returning, changing the world and changing ourselves. We drop to our knees to remind ourselves that it is our spiritual task to get back up and to face the new year. Please rise, Aleinu Hagadol, page 106.
אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לשמוע קול שופר. ברוך אתה אדוני
Dvarim Trua.
Tekiah. Shparim. Tekiah. Tekiah Kadolah.
הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, ארם ונישא. מבין ומאזין, מביט ומקשיב לכל תקייתנו. ותקבל ברחמים, ברחמים וברצון, שדה שופרותינו. ומעדה ברחמים, ברחמים וברצון, שדה שופרותינו.
For those who have died from COVID-19, we say, we remember. For those killed in acts of racism, homophobia, transphobia, prejudice, and anti-Semitism, we say, we remember. For the souls looking for a better life who died at our nation's borders and in detention centers and in the wilderness beyond, we say, we remember. For those killed in acts of violence, we say we remember. For those who succumbed to protracted mental and physical illness, and to those who died suddenly, we say we remember. For those killed in hurricanes and heat waves, tornadoes, wildfires, and flooding, we say we remember. For our loved ones and our community members, our family and our friends, our neighbors, and all those lost in 5780, we say as we enter this new year of 5781, as a single global community, we remember. Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. Please rise and speak aloud the names of all those you remember today. God, who is love, we praise your name. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach yiratei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudasha b'richu la'ela u'la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata Tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran me'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all of us who are in mourning and to all of us who are bereaved. And we say together as one community, Amen.
Oh, say shalom. B'imromav. Oh, say
May the one who reigns peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. Oh, say shalom. Livrova. Oh, say shalom. Livrova. May the one who brings peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down. May the one who makes peace bring peace down, bring peace down.
Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Nima Vafi, James Schmitz, and of course Roger Kumble. Thank you to Rabbi Greenebaum, Bill Spall, Roberta Berendt, and all of our temple staff and volunteers who are working so hard to make sure that we can celebrate this high holiday experience with you all. I'd also like to thank every single one of you who helped sing, chant Torah, who recited Torah blessings, blew the shofar, and anyone else who participated in our service this morning. Feel free to join us tomorrow morning for second day of Rosh Hashanah. We'll begin at 10 a.m. on Zoom. Later today, we have a drive-through tashlich in our upper parking lot. Begins at 3 p.m. And make sure that you check your email for your time slots. Please join us next Sunday, September 27th at 10 a.m. for our Hillside Kever Vote service on Zoom. We'd also like to thank the staff at Hillside Memorial Park and a big mazel tov to Hillside General Manager Rafael Ochoa.
la la